if you don't take those opportunities, you probably just get sucked into the rat race of the corporate life, and you'll blink, and in 30 years' time, you've had 3 kids, you've pushed them through a really great school, you live in a great suburb, nice house, drive a nice car, got the boat. And at that point in time, you ask yourself, have I risked anything in this life?
Hello, and thanks for joining another episode of the Upside Down People podcast. Today, we are talking about faith and business, and I am excited and looking forward to the conversation I'm having with a friend of mine, Caleb Dalziell. His journey from moving over to India with his family to starting a small business and the success of that, along with the highs and lows. So let's jump into today's conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Caleb.
Thank you so much.
I'm actually very excited to have you on because, you're a really good friend. And over the years, we've had many, many deep, shallow, meaningful, all the conversations you could have. So just to get one of those perhaps recorded, I think our listeners will just be delighted by. Welcome.
Thank you. It's been an amazing journey. Developing our friendship over the years, and it's really exciting just to come together and chat.
Yeah, very cool. So for those listening who may be confused, we do both have the name Caleb. Our parents both decided to name us Caleb.
But we're brothers, right?
But we're brothers, yeah.
We get asked that regularly.
We've got asked that quite a few times. We look very different. I'll need to put up a picture so people can see it, and then they can vote for themselves. Do we look like brothers?
Yeah.
And if we were brothers, why would our parents name us to say...
To make it easy for them.
To make it,
Say Caleb once, get 2 responses.
Exactly. Yeah, maybe it's a great way of parenting.
That's it.
Yeah, simplifies things. But I think we've got our whiskeys. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
We are going to strap ourselves in for a great conversation. So I think a good place to start, I know you, I feel like I know you fairly well. But I feel like those who are listening perhaps may not know you as well as I do. Actually, I know they probably won't, chances are. So maybe a great place to start would be sharing a bit about your story. What you've done with your life, where the journey's taken you. Tell our listeners a bit about you.
Yeah, cool. Sounds great.
Sounds good.
So, 34 years old, married with 3 kids, and that all started about 12 and a half years ago.
Wow.
When my wife Alexandra and I got married in 2012. We were both working in our respective professions at the time. She was a children's counsellor. I was a project manager in property development. But soon after getting married, we came to a temporary, I suppose, crossroads. We were quite young. I was probably 22 and she was maybe 23. And once you get married, you kind of ask those questions of yourself, of where your life is going and what you're doing with your life.
Right.
Where you might find yourself in 20, 30 years' time.
Big questions for a 22-year-old to be asking themselves.
This is true.
Yeah.
This is true. I don't know why I was asking those questions of myself at that point in time.
Well, it makes sense. You're getting married. It's no longer just about yourself, right?
That's true.
You're entering into a new season.
A new season, yeah. And for whatever reason, I was just on a spiritual journey at that point in time that I suppose caused me to stop and have a really deep look at my life and where it was heading. And I feel like at that point in time, I had to make a decision of either just going down the route that we were on, working in our respective professions and spending the next 35 years doing that. Had a dream to buy in a certain suburb and get a boat and go to Rottnest on the weekends. And that was the dream that we thought we were pursuing. But in actual fact, God had a different plan for us at that point in time. And through our church, we heard about a organization over in India called Freeset.
Okay.
And we'd recently, fresh into our marriage, we'd watched a documentary on sex trafficking in India. That kind of hit us between the eyes. And our church, Riverview, had a relationship with an organization called Freeset, who helped women stuck in prostitution by offering them dignified employment opportunities.
Yeah.
And so
That's crazy.
Alexa and myself just made the call to quit our jobs and head on over for a year. And
So newly married,
yes,
22, 23 years old.
yeah,
You've got everything you need in terms of culture, says like a stable job, plus it sounds like you had a fairly good job in the property development area.
yes.
Your wife had double income, no kids.
Those were the days.
Those were the days. And you decide to drop all of that because you saw a doco on sex trafficking in India.
Yeah. It was a moment in time where if you don't take those opportunities, you probably just get sucked into the rat race of the corporate life, and you'll blink, and in 30 years' time, you've had 3 kids, you've pushed them through a really great school, you live in a great suburb, nice house, drive a nice car, got the boat. And at that point in time, you ask yourself, have I risked anything in this life? And have I exposed myself to areas of pain in the world? We come from a very middle class, Perth, Western Australia, didn't have the privilege of being exposed to a great deal of cultural and economic diversity as I was growing up, and just thought it was about time, Alexandra and I both got out there and saw the world for what it really was, and took a moment to enter into the reality of how a large percentage of the world live.
Right.
And yeah, there's just been so much that's come from that. And it's kind of shaped the direction of our lives.
Right. So you moved to India. Share a bit about how long were you there for? What were you mentioned you're involved in the organization Freeset. So what did they do? And yeah, how are you guys? How was that time of your life?
Yeah, great question. So the first year that we were there, obviously didn't have any kids. Freeset's vision and mission was basically to create dignified employment opportunities for women who were stuck in the sex trade, so they could leave the line, which is what they called prostitution.
Okay.
Get a skill or a trade as either a seamstress or a print screener. So they're learning how to manufacture garments from start to finish. They're getting trained up in that. At the same time, they're getting psycho-educational support, counselling support. They're getting health insurance. They're getting daycare for their kids.
Wow.
They're getting morning devotionals. They're getting assistance with housing if they're struggling with housing. So it's just this really holistic approach to helping these women, I suppose, reintegrate into society via dignified employment.
Yeah.
So it was an incredible business model because they weren't a charity per se.
Right.
They were actually a profitable business.
So like a social enterprise.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So that first year was an incredible experience for us, to the point where we made a long-term commitment to come back. So we went to language school in Bangladesh to learn Bengali.
So where's the dialect of Bengali? Where's that? Because India is a big country.
Yeah.
And I know like north, south, and
yes,
even in those divides, there's a number of different languages.
Yeah, so we're in Kolkata. which is in West Bengal.
Right.
So they speak Bengali in West Bengal and Bangladesh.
Right.
So because it was really important that we would engage with the women within the organisation, most of them could not speak English. It was important that as foreigners, we went to the effort to learn their language, to communicate with them socially and professionally as well.
That's awesome.
So when we were going to return, and I was going to look after the T-shirts department and basically run the department with about 20 women and 3 or 4 men.
Okay.
And that would need to be done predominantly in Bengali. So there was a bit of pressure on me to go away and learn the language to be able to do my job.
So you learned Bengali?
Yeah, we learned Bengali, yeah. So 3 months at language school in Bangladesh. And then we fell pregnant. So shot on home, had our first kid, Jash, and took him back when he was 8 weeks old.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was a wild ride.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
So now you're in India, in Kolkata, with a 8-week-old.
Yes, correct.
Newborn.
Yeah.
Just learned the language.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that was a wild ride, to say the least. Yeah, Bangladesh was crazy as well.
Yeah, what makes it crazy?
India is just so intense. Bangladesh, the same. It's an assault on your senses. The sights, the sounds, the smells, the people. Everything's just like on steroids. And it's so overwhelming.
Right.
And it's just so different to Perth.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very exhausting experience.
Okay.
But it's an eye-opening experience, and you learn a lot about life in community. You learn a lot about what it means to live on what they would call basically hand to mouth, where they would never earn more than really what they needed to survive that day. And so, yeah, you got to experience a type of poverty that we probably don't see too frequently here in Perth.
Yeah. Well, as someone who's come from Perth, and you mentioned the way you're raised and what you're exposed to was drastically different to this almost completely different world now that you're experiencing. What was that like? So you said it was an assault to the senses, but what did that do to your marriage? And now you've brought a child into that. Did people think you're crazy?
Yeah.
Did you receive quite a bit of support?
Great question. I think in the Western church there is this unusual phenomena where people going into other countries, with a church or sent by the church, has this apparently this esteem to it, and it's very admirable, and so proud of you guys for moving to India and this sort of thing. That's quite an uncomfortable position to be in when you're on the receiving end of that.
Okay.
And whilst there were people that were saying we're crazy, yeah, some people said we're crazy, some people said, so proud of us, and other people probably just didn't say anything. They didn't know what to think. And we probably didn't know what we were doing half the time either, to be honest. And in reflection, there's times that we look back on it and we're like, man, that was negligent, like what we put our 8-week-old through. Are his lungs okay? Like the pollution was insane. Right. Was it safe? Was it safe for my wife to walk through the red light district, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. But yeah, at the end of the day, it was really more about, I think in reflection, what was happening inside of us and what we were exposed to, and maybe what God was doing in us.
Okay.
More than this, esteemed position of, young cross-cultural workers moving to India, with their 8-week-old baby and helping women stuck in the sex trade.
Yeah.
I actually think that's not it. And it probably wasn't helpful half the time either.
Right.
So it feels like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders.
Yeah.
Whereas really, we're just following what we thought was God call over our lives in that moment in time. It's part of our story.
Yeah.
And yes, there's inspirational stories of, incredible connection with women and, being able to mentor women into office admin roles and teaching them Excel spreadsheets and this sort of thing. And really, really, really cool stuff. But it's kind of one or two women, yeah?
Yeah.
And that was like 2 years of our lives.
Right.
And if we're talking about like net change or, who was helped by that experience or who benefited by us being there.
Right.
It's probably just one or two relationships or one or two women, right? Yet there's this weight on your shoulders of we're going to change a community and we're going to see all these incredible things happen.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, India is a very hard place to live for the locals as much as it is for the foreigners coming in. And there's still so much poverty and there's still so much relational breakdown and substance abuse and an attraction to selling their bodies on the line because they can make more money.
Right.
So the system still remains broken, and even though there's these organizations doing these really, really cool things, it's still an overwhelming problem that we face.
Right.
And if, as we go to these places and experience these things, I almost believe that we get changed in that experience more than we are able to affect change, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's true it's a common thing that people say when they go on missions trips. They come back feeling like they've been changed as a person and their views being changed. And a lot of the time it's just being exposed to a different way of doing life that does that to people, I suppose.
Yes.
I'm curious to know, during your time there, what you guys were you mentioned one of the big things was what God was teaching you during that time. Maybe you can share a bit into that.
Yeah. I feel like he taught us a lot in that short time. And the biggest item for me probably, or the biggest lesson, was this joy in the simplicity of life. Because when you're a foreigner in a foreign land, you've left your community, your neighborhood, your family. All of a sudden, your social life kind of slows right down, and it's you and your wife and your 8-week-old baby, and you're trying to build community, and that happens, and it's great and it's enjoyable. But you just find so much time, and so it was a slower pace of life, not rushing everywhere. We're able to appreciate the simple things in life. And I think there was just so much value in that, to the point where when we moved back to Perth, we were like asking the question of how do we reintegrate into life in Perth without just slipping back into that constant busyness that seems to inhale you in this Western culture and society.
Which, that's a curious point, right? Because you mentioned the pace of life in India, just population-wise, is far busier. But the actual feeling of coming back to Perth, a place like Perth, seems like life is busier. And are you able to differentiate between the two? Like, what was it that made India simple? And what makes Perth, which some would consider a pretty simple place, what makes it the lives busy over here?
Yeah. I mean, to speak about the India experience is through the lens of, Alexandra and myself being non-Indians, right? So we're experiencing India as foreigners, whereas here in Perth, we're experiencing life in Perth as born and bred in Perth, white Australians, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard to compare the two due to those different kind of contexts. But what we did see and sense in India for the national, local Indians, it's like as busy as their lives are and the hustle and bustle, they take time to value certain things like family and food preparation, the lead up to the meal.
Yeah. Wow.
They value enjoying work as they go and being in community and interconnected relationships as they work.
Wow.
So it's kind of like while they're at work, they love just having a good banter, a good chat. They love being in the presence of other people. It's very rare that people would be isolated in their work. They're often walking with someone else or working alongside someone else. And it's almost as though the rhythms of life in India were always interconnected.
Yeah.
With other people.
Wow.
And everything was just about the community, the people, the food, and being together.
Yeah.
And yes, life was busy for them, but they did it all in community.
Yeah.
Whereas I suppose life in Perth is very easy to drive to work in your, four-door sedan, and you're the only passenger in that vehicle.
Right.
So you drive in by yourself, you go to work, you punch it out, maybe a few meetings, you finish the day, you punch it home, you drive into the garage, you shut the garage, in you go.
Right.
As this is all cliche. I get that, right? This is all cliche. But there's very minimal interaction with our physical neighbour here in Perth. There's less time to enter into the food prep and the meal experience with the family, all engaged.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, quick, get the kids home, do your homework.
Yeah.
Husband or wife punch out food. The other one's wrangling kids. It's like, eat, then basketball training.
Yeah.
Quick, shower, bed. Right, let's do it all again the next day, right?
Right.
And yes, there's that hustle and bustle in both those contexts.
Yeah.
But here in the Western context, it's kind of just a little bit more individualistic, a little bit more isolated to our immediate family unit.
Yeah.
Whereas, the Indian context was neighbours were at each other's homes regularly, sharing, ingredients, for their food prep.
Yeah.
People travelling together, multiple people in cars. Like, that's quite rare to see if you look at the freeway during peak hour here in Perth, right?
100%.
So, there's just some similarities and differences, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. So you're over there for 2 years. Overall, if you had to put your experience of that time of your life into a sentence or two, what would it be?
This is a tricky one. I would suggest that it was one of the most profoundly challenging, eye-opening, shocking, confronting, upside down experiences of our lives for so many reasons.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's why we're talking to you, because you've got that upside down perspective, Caleb. It's great. I love it. So you leave India, come back to Perth. You mentioned the food wasn't as good there as it was here, so that's why you came back, right?
Yeah.
That's a joke. Caleb loves a good Indian curry.
Love a good curry. Love a good curry.
I don't think I've met someone who challenges your love for good Indian food.
Just good food in general.
Just good food in general. So
bonus points if it's Indian.
Yeah. Well, great segue into what happened next. So you came back to Perth. Did you have a job you were coming to? Were you going to go back to project management or property development? What's the story from here?
So from there, finished some theological studies at a local Bible college.
Who is God?
Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Left with more questions than answers.
That probably means it was a good education.
Yeah, good education, except for the fact the Bible turned into an academic text. And
right.
that's still a little bit of a frustration of mine. But anyway, that's another conversation. So whilst I was finishing some theological study, you have a bit of time on your hands in that sort of environment. So I would catch up with one of my good mates at Zambria Rose on a study break once a week, and conversation about starting a cafe was birthed in that environment. And it turned out that 3 of my really good friends had been talking about starting a cafe for years.
Wow.
And I've always loved good food and coffee, and having just experienced a social enterprise and what that can do for community, the whole cafe thing just seemed like a really logical approach to have an attempt or to try and create a business that exists to positively impact on the community.
Yeah, very cool.
So, from there, the vision and mission for the Tribute Coffee and Kitchen was born.
Awesome. And that's sort of where our stories crossed over, right? So I remember when I met you, so Caleb I was working in hospitality at the time in a cafe as well as a barista. And Caleb came in fresh off the boat from India and said to my manager at the time, hey, I want to start a cafe, and we're doing it. When was it, like a year or 6 months or something? A year from...
Yeah, so pretty sure I started working at that cafe in about July 2016.
Right.
And we were going to open our cafe July 2017.
Yeah, so it was like a year. He's had no coffee experience, no cafe experience. So Perth is super competitive and saturated in terms of the coffee industry. So to start a cafe, you have to know your coffee and you have to have a good menu. So I just remember the manager being like, what is this guy thinking? Like, who does he think he is? And I think I just adopted that mindset as well. It's like, who does Caleb think he is? What, like, this audacious dream? And I think as we had more and more conversations, like, and you shared more of your heart and your vision, like you just said, for what this cafe could be and how it could impact the community and the different spheres of community, right? So you've got your staff, then you've got your areas of influence of like the area locationally where that cafe is situated. And then I remember you had dreams as well of the wider community as well. And just the dream of what this thing could be. And I was sold. I was like, man, this guy has vision, and like, sure, he doesn't have the experience of someone who has all the, in a, I suppose, like a snobbery way, like you need to have met all these criteria to start a cafe. Sure, he doesn't have any of those, but like he has lack of sorry for the cliche, but he has heart and he has vision. And that's sort of where our paths crossed, and I ended up jumping on board and going over to help start the Tribute, the coffee side of things. So tell us about your experience starting a cafe. But there's so many different questions. You went into business with friends, which is...
Never do that.
People say don't do that. Do you look back on that? Well, you obviously still all friends, which is great.
We're great friends.
Yeah, spoiler alert. But do you look back and think, I'll do that differently, or I wouldn't do like another business with friends? Or because that is like, I think it is a common like understanding that people just don't go into business with family or friends.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd still subscribe to that. Don't go into business with family or friends, even though we've had the most amazing experience. But the honest truth is, those 3 families that we are business partners with are some of the most unique, genuine, loving, caring, dedicated, committed people I've ever met in my life. But even that doesn't mean it's all going to be okay, right?
Right.
And even that isn't enough to mitigate against risk of failed business, failed relationships, etc., etc.
Right. So what did you guys do to mitigate that? Because you had very practical things that you put in place and values that you're very clear on.
Yeah. So establishing that value system early on was obviously important. So inevitably it becomes a hierarchy of values, right? Like, do we value the success of this business and financial profit, or do we value the relationships? And if push comes to shove, which one of those is going to survive the pressure cooker?
Right.
And for us, we're all on board with the fact that the relationship was the most important thing with each of the business partners.
Yeah.
And so if push come to shove, business either succeeds and the relationships go south, or the relationships survive and the business fails.
Yeah.
We're all in agreement that the relationship would prevail over the success of the business if push came to shove.
Yeah, okay.
We're all on the same page there. Yet still, even if you put that in place, I can't hand on heart say we would have all held to that commitment, because our business didn't get tested to the point
right
where it was either the relationship or the business.
Yeah.
Because call it lucky, call it blessed, the business went really well. So that wasn't really and truly tested. And so that's where I still probably
have that question mark.
Have that question mark. Like, it's not even really a question mark. It's almost a don't do it. Like I feel like we were so blessed, graced, lucky, call it what you like, to be able to, we're 6 years of the tribute.
Yeah.
Like pretty much today, July, right?
Yeah, you're right.
And it's just insane to think that our relationships are stronger than they were when we started that cafe. But I just know for a fact that that is not the majority, and that is not the common story.
Yeah.
I mean, jumping ahead, we help people in financial hardship, and we look at examples almost weekly now of families or businesses or friendships that are busted, broken, dissolved, that started out rock solid.
Yeah.
And I just think statistically we snuck by through the skin of our teeth.
Potentially. Yeah.
Potentially.
But then also it sounds like you had a realistic idea of what you're getting into, but then also you weren't naive in creating a value system and holding to that. So I can't speak for the rest of the cases, but I do have the question of, like, I wonder if they had a similar value-based system or hierarchy of values that they ran their decisions through. And if they did, would their relational outcomes look different? Because success also does things to friendships, right? It's not just failure. So the tribute, for those who don't know, the tribute Coffee and Kitchen Cafe in Perth is one of the most successful cafes within the city of Perth. It's done very well. And then on top of that, coming through COVID, when a lot of cafes had to close their doors, the success of the tribute continued to grow each year. So that puts a different strain on friendship, success, wealth, all things I know that they're on your focus, but they have the potential to corrupt.
Yeah. I think that shared value system has been invaluable, and I think even to this day, it's just like, for all of us, it's just money.
Yeah.
And like, I know that again sounds cliche, easier to say than actually hold to or believe or live out. And as frustrating as it would be if you lost all your money, as frustrating as it would be if the fruit of 6 years, 7 years, including the startup, all, turned to nothing.
Right.
What's actually going to carry us through life? Is it our investment in the Tribute and whether we get that back and double it or not?
Right.
And, generate passive income? Or is it the relationship with 3 other beautiful families who we care for and love deeply, and, with their kids, we want to see our kids grow up together as friends, and at the end of the day, we'll take the relationship over our investment and any passive income.
Yeah.
As painful as it would be if the business did go south.
Yeah. So that sounds like a very different vision or dream or idea that you had when you left college or university and were looking to get that house in a nice area with a boat that you could do trips over to the beautiful island of Roddo.
Still love that boat.
I mean, you need to make friends with the right people, Caleb.
Are you getting a boat sometime?
My brother actually just bought a little tinny.
Oh, perfect.
I asked,
We're on the right track.
Exactly. I actually asked him about going over to Roddo. He's just like, I wouldn't take that thing on the open seas. I'm like, I know a guy who would.
Give it a crack.
Yeah. So you had that vision of what your life could look like, and almost idolized that, but then something shifted along the way. You went over to India, and I'm not suggesting that India shifted that shift happened before, and you came back, and it seems like that informed that value system that you have, that you have held in creating the cafe and with your friends, that relationships come above individuality. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, 100%. At the end of the day, there's something inside of me that I can't quite explain or put my finger on, that I'm still trying to discover. 34, I still don't know what it is, but it is this deep love for people that I can't quite articulate or understand. But when it comes to holding a judgment over someone, I deeply struggle to hold a judgment over someone, and I can't help but want to value the relationship, even if there's been hurt or pain from that relationship.
Well,
to value that relationship over any other potential business or financial outcomes. And maybe that makes me really bad at business, because I don't watch the bottom line, and, maybe I'm not as shrewd as I should be as a business owner. I don't know. But when all is said and done, I want every staff member at the Tribute to be able to say, hand on heart, Caleb and the boys cared for me, and they looked after me, and they were invested in me and who I was as a human and where I was going with my life. And they did everything they could to reasonably support me in pursuing my dreams. And if, when all is said and done, the Tribute hasn't made any money and it's not worth anything, if all the staff that have come through have had that experience, I'll be okay with that.
Yeah.
But I will not be okay with the reverse.
Right.
I wouldn't be able to live with myself if the Tribute made bucket loads of cash. We get that boat, we move to that nice suburb, I'm kicking back at Roddo, and all my staff think I never saw them, I never heard them, I never cared for them, I never paid them enough. I just wouldn't be able to operate in that space.
Right.
So it's just this regard for people and a care and a deep love for people and just wanting to always do what I can to love and honor the person, to not hold a judgment. I don't know what that is, and I'm still trying to figure it out, but it's kind of marked my life and impacted the course of my life to date.
Yeah.
Most likely will for the indefinite future.
Right. How much of your relationship with God or your faith informs that wrestle that you have?
Yeah, deep question. Needed a sip of this whiskey after that.
I'm almost finished, mate.
Gee whiz. My faith gets more and more simple the older I get, Caleb.
I love it.
And I know.
What do you mean?
So, obviously did some time at, Bible college and did a deep dive and got all academic and theological. And
sounds like there's a slight disdain there, but we can dive into that another time.
Yeah, well, it just didn't produce what I thought it was going to produce.
Okay.
In terms of like my walk with God. And in fact, it took the edge off it, if that makes sense. Like the deepest and most intimate my relationship with God has ever been has just been like a self-led intimacy of time with God and time in His Word and soaking and meditating and fasting and just all those basic spiritual disciplines, right?
Right.
That took me way deeper than any theological units that I did.
Yeah.
In my studies, and it's almost as though that time at Bible college created like a little bit of a rejection to academic theology and forced me to discover my own faith in its most simple form.
Right.
And for me, it's like as simple as love God and love neighbor, right? And the more I think about that, and the more I try and figure out the more I try and dive into the depths of that and the nuances of that and how that relates to me and my life and how I interact with others, it's like far out. Like I just need to love God and like love my neighbor, but like truly love my neighbor. How do I love my neighbor? Is there some like example of what it means to love my neighbor? Yes. Who is that guy? Jesus. What did he do? He saw the person. He saw their needs. He did not judge them. He treated them with empathy and kindness, and he was compassionate towards them, and he wanted the best for them. Therefore, do I not have the same obligation over my life to like love my neighbor and truly love them?
Yeah.
That's kind of the journey I'm on.
That's a great journey to be on.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
So just want to unpack that experience a little bit, the Bible college experience. What were you expecting when you entered into that space? Or what were you hoping for? Because obviously there's an expectation and unmet expectation. So there's either deferred hope or disappointment or whatever it may be that came to the surface. But what were you hoping for that experience to be?
Again, very good question. I don't even know what I was hoping for, to be honest, because the catalyst for the studies were basically the fact that we're cross-cultural workers. Therefore, the sending organisation said we need to do some further studies.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, cool.
So it was during your time.
Yeah, in India, preparing for India and et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
Because we already had undergrad degrees, we're like, oh, let's do some postgraduate studies in divinity. Yeah. Oh, divinity sounds interesting. We'll learn about the divine. And and so were there expectations? I'm sure there were.
Yeah.
What were they? I don't know. Was my experience in any way, shape or form what I expected it to be? Probably not. Was it organized, academic, religion? Yes. Was that what I needed at that point in time? Probably not.
Right.
Would I ever do it again? Probably not. But that's not to say it's not great and it's not good. And some people would probably have the opposite experience. I
Right.
totally hold that, and I'm totally okay with that. But for whatever reason, it was structured and organized, trying to encourage free thinking and expression and discovering what your own faith looks like and how it's working out.
Right.
And there were just times when that didn't seem to be actually true,
Okay.
if that makes sense. Because there's still a marking guide. Yeah, because there's still a marking guide for that assessment, right?
Right. They're still looking for something.
They're still looking for something, whether they say they are or not.
Okay.
There's still a right and a wrong in the exam.
Yeah.
There's still a marking guide for the assignments. And they want you to explore and dive deep within a certain set of parameters. And if you start asking questions outside of those parameters or that marking guide,
Right.
that's wrong. Get back in the box.
Right.
Okay. That just didn't quite add up in my world.
Yeah. Okay. Did you ever push back on those things, or were you?
I think I just walked away disenfranchised.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
But that's just my journey. It's
Yeah.
not for everyone.
No. Well, it sounds. Another follow-up question on that is: do you think you're perhaps placing too much responsibility on an institution to provide for you what only God could provide, or looking to an institution like a college that specializes in divinity or theology to, I suppose, enhance or further your relationship with God or your discovery?
Yeah, potentially. And look, I don't want to skip over the fact that there were moments throughout the course that I deeply valued being in the Word and in commentaries and going, deeper than I probably would have gone if I hadn't entered into that
Yeah.
theological space. So I don't want to discount that. But yeah. You probably naturally go in expecting something that maybe is an unreasonable expectation of a educational institution.
Yeah. And I think the reason I asked that as well is because I studied, my undergrad was in theology, and I did enjoy it quite a bit, but I also left with a lot of questions, and certain questions of my faith as well seemed to be more like academic instead of this relational aspect that we read about in scriptures. And the more I think about it is like, I wonder if, like yourself, I place that heavy emphasis on, here's an institution that their sole purpose is to unpack the word of God. And this is what we've been given. God's word is the way he reveals himself to us. So it's like, well, if that's their specialty, then I can have this expectation that I'm going to learn, I'm going to grow deeper, and my love will grow wider and deeper and fuller and more holistic. But I think when we place that expectation on those institutions, even something like the church, if we go to the church expecting our relationship with God to flourish or suddenly go into a new level, it's a burden that that's not what it was created for. It's just a thought. So a whirlwind of 5 years.
And we were best buddies the whole time from the day we met, right?
Cheeky little wink. Are you talking about the day? Yeah, well, I'll leave you to disclose however much information you knew about that, about our relationship.
It was just an interesting beginning, wasn't it?
It was. I was a very prideful, arrogant person.
Oh, I didn't mean to, force you into a corner to disclose that.
Caleb, I know you're fishing here, so This is Caleb. He says he's not judgmental, but then he'll just cause you to judge yourself.
I just look back on those days and I'm like, I find it comical to think where we started,
Man,
right, compared to where we are today.
It's actually incredible.
It is.
You are one of, I don't have many close friends, Caleb, but I can honestly say you're in my inner circle.
Oh, thanks.
And it's because, yeah, it's weird to see where we started.
Wild blow-ups behind
Wild
the
blow-ups,
machine.
yeah, just misunderstandings, classic newlyweds that learning how to communicate to each other, both think different things and different communication style, all of that.
Yeah. You would have thought the whole same name thing would have brought some form of synergy, but it's always like the opposite.
Yeah, usually it's just like we should have bonded and connected on that, but maybe I just saw it as like competition or something. Who knows?
Yeah. Who's the better Caleb?
Stupid. Yeah. I'll happily own that one.
You are the better Caleb, so yeah, you can own that, mate. Better looks better.
No, I mean, I'll own like I was the ignorant, stupid. You are a genuine guy, and that comes through in terms of just what you've spoken about, the tribute cafes. I think one of the reasons it's been successful is you are a great businessman. I know you question that. I've witnessed firsthand the way you've run that business, and the way, you've treated the staff, and on a more practical level, the actual store. So on every level, like you take a genuine care.
Thanks.
But yeah, I think, so we're talking about the Tribute Cafe. It's successful. It's been very successful because of who you are, what you've implanted in that, and the culture that you've created as well. The old saying goes, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it's true, especially when it comes to hospitality, is you can have a great cafe in terms of good coffee, good food, but people won't keep coming back if the culture is toxic. But you've created a culture of kindness, of welcome, of compassion, of empathy. You've installed that into the staff, and without creating a long story, that's one of the, I think, dominant reasons why the Tribute's been so successful in business, but then also in the staff that it employs and raises up, and the impact that it has on the community. I think if anyone had to go to the Tribute Cafe and just have a walk around, it's in Shelley in Perth, a walk around the river, and just stop someone and ask them, hey, what's your thoughts on this Tribute Coffee and Kitchen Cafe? I reckon, like, with confidence, they'll be like, you have to go there. It's great. Like, the people are awesome. The cafe aesthetically is just light, bright, beautiful, welcoming, warm presence. And I think that's an incredible way and gifting that you have that you've brought into business.
Thanks.
You did that. Why did you leave something that was so successful and continues to grow and progress? Why did you leave that into what are you currently doing now?
Yeah, so I left it because the head barista called Caleb, who we promoted to cafe manager, called Caleb, basically rendered my job redundant. So I was just like, well, if you're going to do that, I'm out of here. You can run the show.
You make it seem like it was a plot.
No, look, in the conceptual days of the Tribute, running a cafe was not something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. As you know, it's intense, yeah. Like, it's a 7-day operation, 3 nights a week for burgers. It's relentless, it's ruthless. Things break all the time. Staff get sick. They take holidays. And who fills the gaps, right?
Exactly.
And you're basically on call almost, what feels like almost 24/7.
Yeah. It's hard to switch off, right?
It's very hard to switch off. You're waking up in the morning, checking your phone, expecting someone to have slept in or missed their, 6 a.m. shift start time.
Or even you're out on your day off at the beach and you're just gone for a surf and dreading looking at your phone because you're like, I'm gonna have to come into work. I'm gonna have to fix that fridge. I'm gonna have to organize where all the milk's going. I'm gonna have to fill in for that staff member who had to go home because they said whatever it may be. There's always something. Yeah,
it's relentless. So it got to a point where I suppose it wasn't a super sustainable job when you've got 3 young kids. And so, I had to have a look at my position and what was right for my family and what was sustainable for me as well. Like, I'm not sure if you remember, but I used to get sick all the time because I was just so exhausted running on the smell of an oily rag.
Yeah. You also had young kids.
Kids who would bring stuff home.
Man, I'm getting exposed to all of that.
Yeah, you know what it's like now.
And then if your immune system's already running low,
you just catch it and you get sick, and it happens every couple of weeks.
Yeah,
it's relentless.
Pretty brutal.
So I think at the 4-year mark, got to the point of knowing that my time was coming to an end operationally at the Tribute. So then the question is, what's next, and where on earth am I going? What am I doing with my life? Got 3 young kids and a wife to provide for, yet value freedom, flexibility, the ability to drop my kids at school, pick them up if I need to, go to sports carnivals, coach their basketball team, all that sort of thing. So I can't just go back to the property development industry where I was pre-India and go get a 9-to-5 in Perth CBD, because that's just not going to work for our family. And I've had the taste of small business ownership and being able to create your own schedule. So I can't just throw that away. So how do I tie in a deep, genuine and sincere care for people and people's well-being with maybe my skill set, which is originally property and finance, and obviously small business experience, and then met a local guy through the cafe called Mark, super lovely guy. Got chatting with him one day, and it turns out that he runs a business helping clients in financial hardship, and he helps basically negotiate their debt away so they can avoid bankruptcy and rebuild and start again. He was also a mortgage broker. Understanding the banking system was pretty cool to him, being able to help them out of financial hardship.
Right.
So about 18 months ago, started essentially consulting to him and working alongside him in that space, mortgage broking and helping clients in financial hardship. And he recently started a real estate company. And given my property background, I'm a real estate agent for his company.
Yeah, wow.
And we have the ability to help clients out of financial hardship, which often means selling properties that are holding them back financially, where they may have negative equity or they can't afford their mortgage repayments. I suppose just working in that property and finance space for many, many years comes quite naturally to me.
Yeah.
Get to see people move from devastating financial positions into really strong financial positions and recover. And
that's huge.
And it works with my family. It's flexible.
Yeah.
And I really, really, really enjoy doing all those things. So that's where I'm at today. And again, trying to figure out how it's all going to work into the future, but just taking a day at a time.
Yeah. So what are you currently learning about your faith within the space that you find yourself?
Yeah, so there is no annual salary in the work that we do.
Would you recommend it to others?
Oh. The taste of an annual salary from a small business owner's perspective can at times be so alluring.
Yeah, right.
But as we've discussed earlier, it comes at a cost, right?
Mm.
The corporate world and the rat race and the meetings and the hours, and so as tasty as a juicy salary may be, I'm on the small business end of the spectrum.
That's what obviously God's given you faith for as well, by the sounds of your journey.
Apparently, yes, but that does not mean that it's not a daily struggle. Yeah. Because in this line of work, you work and you work and you work, and you get paid for the work that you've done, and sometimes you work for a month and you work for 2 months, but you don't get paid until the month after.
Yeah.
And so at times it can be very hard to manage your cash flow, to know what you're actually earning, to know when the next paycheck's coming in. And as a husband and as a father, that's quite at times demoralizing position to be in.
Right.
And that's where it gets hard, yeah? If you're getting paid every fortnight or every month, you're living the dream. As a small business owner, if you're getting paid consistently and you have the freedom of being a small business owner and the money's reasonable, it's like a great outcome.
Right.
Win-win.
So why, that's a question, right? Why not? You had the means, or you still potentially have the means to enter into that in some capacity. Why not do like 3 days a week at the cafe or something like that? And
I mean, financially, that would make a lot of sense, right? It would take a good chunk of stress away, and we'd just have some cash flow consistency, and things would probably be a lot easier mentally,
right,
and financially.
Yeah.
Yet to run a small business and to work for yourself is to not click your fingers and come into immediate success. Yeah. Everything, as we've experienced with the Tribute, as successful as it was as a brand new cafe, it took us over 3 years to pay back the directors' loans, right?
Yeah.
So that's essentially like a 3-year period of sowing and not technically profiting.
Yeah.
We hadn't paid ourselves back. And I reckon there's something in that 3-year number for small business owners or consultants who are starting out from scratch.
Right.
It's like if you can survive those first lean 3 years of, beans and rice and, a living stripped back, simple life. If you can survive those, you're probably going to be okay. And then from the 3-year mark onwards, things will start to build.
Yeah.
And so I understand that fundamental concept of small business. And I'm at this point in time, I'm hanging in there, 18 months in, so halfway into that 3-year mark.
Yeah. Year and a bit to go.
Yeah, I still got a year and a bit to go, and it's hard, right?
Yeah.
It is hard, but you just see little flickers of hope and little moments of, I think I'm on the right track, but it doesn't make it easy.
Yeah. So the flickers of hope and the little wins along the way make it worth it. What advice would you give to someone who's looking to start a business or just get involved in something like that, knowing all the highs and all the lows?
Yeah, I think the first question you want to ask yourself is why on earth? Why on earth am I doing this? Because generally it's an opportunity cost conversation, right? So it's in starting this small business or on going out on my own, what am I giving up? Or what am I saying no to? And generally it's a decent salary and a reasonable job, generally speaking. So the first thing you have to be like dead set on is, am I willing to give that up for a period of uncertainty, of potential extended period of uncertainty and lack of consistency in highs and lows, in exciting times and depressing times? Am I willing to give that up?
Yeah.
And if so, why am I willing to give it up? Is it for autonomy, like to be a free agent, to create my own destiny, to work from home, to go for a surf when I want to go for a surf, to sneak out for a sneaky lunch with my wife when I want to go for lunch with my wife, to pick my kids up, or to be there for their assembly or their merit certificate, or to coach their basketball? Or what is it? What is the driving force between wanting to go out on my own and create something? Or is it the dream of creating? Is it creating a movement, a culture, a product, a service, innovating, developing something that would benefit a community or the health and well-being of someone or something? What is it? So what are you giving up, and are you willing to give that up for what you want to create or build or afford yourself, whether it be time or money?
Yeah.
That's a critical question, because if you don't have clarity on that, I'd say you probably need to go and do some serious, deep work on that before you take the plunge.
Yeah.
Because when things are tough, if you don't have that sure and steadfast vision of why you're doing it, you'll just throw the towel in and say it's too hard.
Yeah.
Going back to my job. Which there's nothing wrong with that either. Yeah.
Yeah. Final question for this would be how important would you say has your faith been in this whole journey? And you're still obviously on a journey by the sounds of it. How important would you say that's been in grounding you, in directing you, in providing hope amidst challenges? And
yeah, it's definitely been fundamental. I don't know if, again, cliche as it sounds, I don't know if I would have gotten this far if I didn't have someone else to rely on other than my own ability, capacity, and willpower, because that only gets you so far. And so to have a deep faith that there is a God out there who cares for me and my family enough that we're going to be okay is kind of just enough to keep me going, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
He didn't promise me that it would be easy, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't say, go out on your own and I'll bless everything you do and you'll have success and financial freedom and good health, so go for it. It was kind of just this piece that the direction that I was heading was okay and right, and that it's going to be okay, but it may not be as easy as I hoped it would be.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, it's been awesome just hearing that journey that you've been on for the past 12 plus years, the hope that you have amidst challenges, the values that you hold so closely in doing business, in adventure, in uncertainty. Yeah, there's so much to be said there for the character that people can look to and I think really be encouraged by. So thanks for the conversation.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Caleb.
Chat again soon.
100%.